In last video, we have seen how to build auto prompt generator service using the prompt generation guide provided by OpenAI. In that video, we have used OpenAI models only, but we do have access to meta prompt. So what we are going to try in this video is to use the same meta prompt and pass it to open source model and see whether we would be able to achieve same thing using open source model as well. Let's get started. So we are just going to work on the same code base what we had in our last video. Our utils.py, we are going to add another functions which would help us to generate a prompt using open source model. So what we can do, we can just copy paste this particular code what we have over here. I can just take it and I can just paste here. So to access open source model, we are going to use Ollama. So I'm just naming this as Ollama generate prompt. And before you can use any open source model using Ollama, you just have to make sure few things. You can go to your command prompt and you have to make sure you do have open source models available on your system. So I can just check it out using Ollama list, what kind of open source model I have. And I can see I do have access to Llama 3.2 latest. So this is the model which I'm planning to use in this case. If you don't know how to work with Ollama and how to pull all this open source model, so we do have videos on our channel. You can refer those videos. I will also put some links in the description which would help you to get started with Ollama. To access this, first thing what we have to do is import chat from Ollama. And if you don't have Ollama installed on your system, then you can just use pip install Ollama to install Ollama on your system. I do have it already, so you can see requirement already satisfied. That's good. I can just clear it out and then we can go to our functions. In this case, we are not going to have anything like client.chat.completion what we do get in OpenAI. So here we are only going to have a chat, and then actually we can pass our model. And as we have seen, I do have access to Llama 3.2 and Mistral, so I can go ahead with Llama 3.2, and rest of the things like we can keep it as it is. One more change what we have to do in this case, we are not going to have anything like choices message.content to take the output. We have to go with message and then we just have to go with content. This is how actually we can pass the same prompt and same user input to our open source model and access the output. Now another thing what we need to do is go to our main.py, and here we have to add another endpoint. I'm just going to add it like this just to separate it out. I'm just going to say auto prompt and then Ollama, and then I can just copy paste same message and I can rename this function as well. And then instead of calling generate prompt, we have to call Ollama generate prompt. So one more change what we need to do is we have to call Ollama generate prompt, and we also have to make sure like this is available over here because we are importing method from utils. Now we can go ahead and start our server. Our server is up and running. So now we are going to pass same input message. So we only have to modify the endpoint. So I'm just going to add Ollama over here with the same input, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit the send button. Because we are dealing with open source model, it's going to take some time to generate the output. So we have to wait for that. And finally, we've got the output. In this case, you could see it has taken 3 minutes to generate this kind of response. At the same time, because you may not be able to read each and everything from here, as we have seen in our last video, we have also built a consumer application that we can use it. In this case, we can just point to this particular URL auto prompt Ollama, and then we can get the output in the proper format. So open source model was also able to craft a proper response in this case. Here it has started identify PII flagging task and then develop an algorithm to identify the PII with the provided input. Requirement, you can see the model should be able to identify various type of PII including names, date, location, financial information. It must flag the identify PII in a specific format, and then the output format should be like this, the type of PII, value of the PII, and then there are certain examples as well. Yeah, in this case also like it has worked pretty well. So whether it's an open source model or whether it's OpenAI model, if you have access to any other model, you can also try to pass the same meta prompt and you can make it work. That's how we can integrate open source model to generate the prompt automatically. Few additional things what we can test in this video. One is going to be how to generate a structured output and how to generate function schema. We have already added all these functions in our last video, so let's try to test it out this as well. This is going to work on on the OpenAI model. You can also try to, point it to open source model and see like what response are you going to get. First, let's try to generate a structured output. We can just point it to auto prompt and schema endpoint. So here, instead of calling Ollama, I can just point to a schema. So let's see actually what we are passing in this schema. What is the prompt that we are passing? So here we do have our structured meta prompt, and it's going to refer this structured out meta schema. Return a valid schema for the described JSON. You must also make sure all fields in object are set as required. And here we do have one example as well, how the schema is going to look like. And you can see the input is going to be passed like this. So I can just take this as a reference and I can just modify our input. So I will just go ahead over here and I would say generate schema to identify PII in the given input text, and I will just try to hit this endpoint. And here we are able to get the schema. It has just defined the name first of all, then we do have properties. So we are going to have certain properties, input text and identified PII. So we are going to have this particular string and this is going to be description. Then we are going to have identified PII, which is going to be type of array. And then we are going to have a list of identified PII elements within the input text, which is going to become as a description. And under that we are going to have a certain properties, the type of PII identified, then the actual PII which has been extracted, and then the confidence score, and the required value is going to be type value and the confidence score. You can see like just based on our input, it is able to define the schema as per our meta prompt. Similarly, what we can do is we can also try to test out our function schema. In this case also we do have a function meta schema which we have taken it from the documentation, and then we can pass our function meta prompt. And here you do have some examples as well, like what is going to be input and how the output is going to come. In this case, what I can do, like I can keep the same input and I can just change the endpoint. So for function, our endpoint is going to be this. So I can just take this particular endpoint and I can just pass it over here. Yeah, there had been misspell in this case, so I can just do this. And now I can just try to hit the endpoint once more. You can see we are getting a function schema. So here the function name is going to be identify PII and then generate a schema to identify the PII in the given input text. And then we are going to get the output accordingly. So you can see like this particular output is a bit different what we have got in the structured output schema. So this is like based on our use case, and because we have exposed this as a separate endpoint, so you can call the separate endpoint and get the desired output. Once you get like all this data, you can pass it to your model and can evaluate the output. This is all what we have in this video. Thank you for watching.